Raskin here, and I would give you the floor for some introductory remarks for around 10 minutes, and afterwards we have the opportunity for the members here in this committee to come in. So welcome.
Chair Cavazzini and to esteemed members of the Parliament, thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. It is truly a high honor to appear before you. I appreciate the chance to speak with everyone in Brussels from my office here in Washington, D.C., in the Capitol. Last year, when I learned that the Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee plan to hold hearings on foreign government threats to freedom of speech in America, I naively assumed that we would hear from Russian dissidents about Vladimir Putin's persistent interference in our political campaigns, or his jailing of American journalists like Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Hershkovitz. I thought we might hear from Chinese pro-democracy activists about the harassment, threats, and violence directed against Uyghurs, Tibetans, and other refugee victims and human rights critics of China living in America, or perhaps from Saudi human rights activists about the murder conspiracy against slain Washington Post writer Jamal Khashoggi, who was assassinated by agents of the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for agitating for democratic freedom in his country. But silly me, I should have known that the MAGA Republicans who are allowing President Trump to trample freedom all over America today would have no quarrel with the autocrats of Russia or China or North Korea or Saudi Arabia violating our freedom too. Why would Trump criticize fellow authoritarians like Kim Jong-un, who he writes love letters to, or Vladimir Putin, who he brags of a great relationship with and whose word he trusts above our own national security agencies, and whose own violations of liberty Donald Trump never comments upon, when they can attack their true enemy, liberal democracy in the European Union and anti-authoritarian European nations like Germany, for banning the neo-Nazi and anti-constitutional political parties that Trump, Vance, and Bannon have actually endorsed and promoted. A year ago in Munich, J.D. Vance explained that the threat that worries him most is not Russia, it's not China, it's the threat from within, which he described as Europe's retreat from our historic free speech values. And Trump's MAGA allies have latched on to the Digital Services Act, which it has cast as a, quote, comprehensive digital censorship law, as the chief impediment to Americans' right to spread hate speech throughout the world. Since then, the administration has doubled and even tripled down on its efforts to intervene in the domestic politics of European countries to boost MAGA-aligned movements. Last November, the White House's national security strategy spelled out a policy of promoting European greatness, an unsubtle signal that the MAGA movement now has its sights on Europe. The strategy called for the U.S. government to promote patriotic European parties. Just last month, the State Department announced it would fund efforts to promote free speech in Europe. The Trump administration has been busy coordinating with Nigel Farage's Reform Party, and this weekend, Trump filmed a message from the Oval Office pledging his complete and total endorsement to the Putin-backed authoritarian Viktor Orban, the champion of illiberal democracy in Hungary's upcoming elections. As the administration works hard to promote the MAGA movement in Europe under the guise of defending free speech, I thought it might be helpful to remind all of you of this administration's crackdowns on universities, law firms, libraries, newspapers, museums, and broadcasters right here in the United States. The Trump administration is engaged in an Orwellian whitewash of American history in our museums, our textbooks, and our national parks. At our National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Bible that civil rights activist Reverend Brown carried when he marched with Martin Luther King Jr. and Jesse Jackson was removed. In Philadelphia, an exhibit honoring enslaved people was removed by National Park Police at the Independence National Historical Park within feet of the Liberty Bell. In our National Museum of American History, references even to Donald Trump's impeachments in Congress have been removed. Trump's MAGA movement is banning books in school libraries across America, and the Department of Defense is banning almost 600 books, including 1984, The Handmaid's Tale, Native Son, books on race like Between the World and Me, and even books by service members like With Honor and Integrity, Transgender Troops in Their Own Words, in schools that are attended by tens of thousands of children of American military service members. The Trump administration is punishing private law firms, banning their lawyers from public courthouses and buildings, and revoking their security clearances simply for representing whistleblowers or taking positions in court against the administration. The Trump administration is destroying the freedom of public broadcasting with efforts to harass, intimidate, control, sue, or shut down the press, including ABC, CBS, NBC, NPR, and PBS. Trump has worked with the Republican-controlled Federal Communications Commission to blackmail, shake down, censor, and control media companies, including when they forced Skydance and Paramount to install a spy, a human monitor, to police CBS News programs to make sure that they are sufficiently pro-Trump in order to get approval of a corporate merger. This is routine extortion now, and the chair of the FCC, Brendan Carr, is now openly threatening to revoke the broadcast licenses of news and networks that do not censor negative stories about Trump's war in Iran. The administration is crushing academic freedom at private universities and colleges by canceling and withholding billions of dollars in scientific and medical research funding from their programs, even for urgent and life-saving studies about breast cancer or heart attacks, as a way to force them to impose a government orthodoxy and political thought control on academic studies, on faculty hiring, on admission practices of students, and any student and faculty speech which MAGA considers politically incorrect, especially speech related to the Middle East. Worst of all, with Trump and Stephen Miller's mass immigration roundup and authoritarian crackdown on protests against it, we are seeing deadly police state-style violence, not just against immigrants, but against U.S. citizens engaged in political assembly and expression in their own communities. The Trump administration's masked agents from ICE, which is the Immigration Control and Enforcement Department, and CBP, Customs and Border Protection, are operating like a lawless private paramilitary force and secret police by attacking and even killing the political critics of the president. In the first few weeks of this year, ICE agents killed Renee Good, a U.S. citizen and 37-year-old mother of three, gunning her down in cold blood simply for exercising her First Amendment rights in Minneapolis. Days later, CBP and ICE agents killed Alex Preddy, a U.S. citizen and ICU nurse in Minneapolis, treating military veterans, simply for exercising his right to record government officials in action and to speak to and render aid to another U.S. citizen, a woman who had been violently shoved to the ground by an ICE agent. This small act of kindness on Alex Preddy's part brought the hellfire of a gang of ICE agents down on him. As they pummeled and punched him, one agent discovered Preddy's firearm, which Preddy had never drawn or brandished, despite the instantaneous cover-up lies and propaganda of the administration. The agent confiscated this lawful weapon, which he carried lawfully under the Second Amendment and Minnesota's state conceal and open carry law, and then the ICE agents proceeded to shoot him 10 times, gunning him down in cold blood simply for exercising his First and Second Amendment rights. In Chicago, Border Patrol police shot 5 times U.S. citizen Marimar Martinez, a Montessori school teacher, when she was on her way from her home to her church to deliver clothes that she'd collected for the poor. When she saw the violent raid taking place against people in her neighborhood, she honked her horn to warn people. This prompted an agent to swerve his car into her car, at which point he began shooting. She could feel, quote, bullets continue to pierce her body. I saw my life flash before me and slowly began to think, this is the end of me, she told us. I could recite equally gruesome cases to you for the next 2 hours if we had the time. The bottom line is that Americans are now being killed, tear-gassed, bullied, chased, sued, jailed, intimidated, and harassed for the audacity of exercising their basic political free speech rights under our First Amendment, protesting Trump and lawfully recording the officers engaged in these authoritarian tactics. Democrats in the House and Senate, Democratic state attorneys general, civil society, as well as Republicans who've remained faithful to the Constitution, have fought back against these violations of the civil rights and freedoms of the people. Together, we have brought more than 700 lawsuits against the administration, and we have won the overwhelming majority of our cases in court. Even at the Supreme Court, which is stacked and packed with Trump-aligned justices, we have scored significant victories. Just last month, the Supreme Court, including 2 justices appointed by Trump himself, overturned the president's Liberation Day tariffs, a central part of his policy agenda. And it's not just litigation. Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the member of the cabinet charged with implementing Trump's immigration agenda, appeared before our committee and faced sustained pressure from Democratic and even some Republican members about the corruption and lawlessness in her department. Less than 24 hours later, she was fired. Of course, none of these suits can bring back Renee Good or Alex Petty, or any of the other people murdered by federal agents. But we are fighting against this administration everywhere we can, and we are winning again in the vast majority of cases. Undaunted by the fact that commanding majorities of the American people reject their lethal police state tactics, our Republican colleagues are desperately trying to change the subject. They want people to be talking about the digital service laws of the EU instead of violence, government violence in the streets of America. They have held 3 hearings to discuss a totally hypothetical and barely articulable assault on Americans' First Amendment rights, which they claim is happening an ocean away from here. They've spent huge amounts of money and time, issued dozens of subpoenas and even more letters, and convened us in endless hearings to examine the digital and domestic laws of our foreign democratic allies. They've invited far-right groups and leaders like the Putin-loving free speech imposter and Trump sycophant Nigel Farage to America to tell us how dire the situation in Europe is. To the handful of people in the EU who may be tempted to think that Trump and MAGA are sincerely working to protect freedom of speech in our country, come on over to America and see what they're doing to destroy our freedom, to force companies to only host content they approve of, to kill people for exercising free speech, to kidnap college students for going to a political rally, to ban books from our libraries, to send the military into our cities, to take over our universities, to wreck our professional civil service, and to turn the government into a money-making machine for Donald Trump and his family. Think twice before taking any advice from these Orwellian free speech violators. Now, MAGA's substantive attack on the EU is based on the fact that several countries who have experienced the trauma of fascism and genocide and aggressive war, including Germany and Belgium, Croatia, Czech Republic, have criminalized Nazi speech and hate speech generally since World War II. The DSA gives effect to national speech laws, as I understand it. So that if something is criminal offline to do in a specific nation, it's criminal to do online as well in that nation. This means that people in Germany can be prosecuted by Germany for posting swastikas or making pro-Nazi utterances online. But Germany has no jurisdiction to prosecute Swedish citizens who post Nazi material online from Sweden, or American citizens who post Nazi materials online in America. The MAGA attack on the EU is based on the idea that the digital service providers will develop content standards around the anti-Nazi and anti-hate speech laws of the most restrictive countries in Europe, thus impinging on the rights of hate speakers and Nazis in America. There are multiple problems with this argument. The first is that under the DSA today, German authorities can enforce German law, and American authorities can enforce American law, which is as it should be. There has been no erosion of the American free speech standard allowing hate speech and pro-Nazi speech, or the German standard forbidding it. The only government that appears to want to globalize its own domestic law is the United States under Trump by legalizing pro-Nazi speech in countries where it is presently banned. This agenda has little to do with free speech absolutism and everything to do with promoting far-right parties in Europe. Second, even if the DSA applied Germany's hate speech law in all of Europe, that would not change American First Amendment law any more than Germany's law has changed our First Amendment approach. So why would we care? That would be up to Europe. The Republicans fear that EU members' laws that prohibit unlawful speech offline will now be applied online. And to support this hypothetical fear, they repeatedly refer to cases brought by Alliance Defending Freedom on behalf of protesters who violated safe zones around women's healthcare clinics. Their examples of so-called thought policing include that of Adam Smith Connor, who was convicted in the UK for violating the safe zone around a healthcare clinic while he was praying for an abortion his romantic partner had some 22 years before. This argument is as nonsensical as it sounds. Smith Connor violated a physical barrier around a building. It's hard to conceive of how that would be applied to online speech. Furthermore,
Raskin,
this example fails to illustrate...
Come to a closure. Thank you. Can you round up? Thank you.
Yes, I just have one more minute. This example shows the severe free speech differences between us and the UK, as we also have safe zones around women's healthcare clinics under federal law. My Republican colleagues claim that their concern is that European laws on illegal speech will be internationalized by big tech companies, yet the evidence shows the exact opposite. House Judiciary Republicans have used the committee's subpoena power to try to uncover evidence that social media platforms are planning on using their laws as the global standard for content on their platforms. They've used our committee to interview company executives and obtain thousands of internal pages of company memos and communications. That evidence shows that social media companies are not looking to apply European standards to U.S. content. Instead, the evidence we've reviewed shows they are actively working on geofencing their content moderation policies so that content shown to users in Germany complies with German laws and content shown to users in the U.S. complies with U.S. laws. The Trump MAGA right is not engaging with your leaders in good faith. Their obsessive pushback on your tech rules is for one purpose only: to dismantle any laws around the world that would curtail far-right propaganda, disinformation, and hate speech. The Republicans are vilifying robust European liberal democracies simply for engaging the kind of normal line-drawing exercises that we engage in under the First Amendment with respect to child pornography, defamatory speech, online scams, and false advertising, and speech inciting riots, all forms of speech that the First Amendment does not protect and whose contours must still be drawn by law. Democrats reject the Trump administration's brutal suppression of free speech in America and the fraudulent poser campaign for far-right racist speech in Europe. Be sure to check out how the president, members of his party, and his supporters treat Americans at home before you take to heart any of their criticism of your country and your laws. I thank the committee and the chair for your indulgence and the chance to speak with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving your perspective on the discussions in your committee and also on the EU digital legislation and the attacks on the EU digital legislation. So now, as I announced, we have the opportunity for the members to come in, ask questions, and at the end, of course, Mr. Raskin can come again for answering our questions, and also we have the Commission here. And we start with Christel Schaldemose, the chair of the DSA Working Group.
Thank you very much, Chair, and warmly welcome to you, Representative Raskin. I'm happy that you spoke also in the last part of your speech about the Digital Services Act, because that was the reason why we invited you here today to talk to you about the report in your committee, but also more in general about what we can do to get rid of the misunderstandings around the Digital Services Act. I myself went to Washington 5 weeks ago with the European Parliament. The Congress were not in session, so we met with stakeholders, authorities, but also some of the staffers of your committee. And during that conversation, it became clear to me that there was quite some misunderstandings about what the DSA is. Well, you did make it right here in your speech, by the way. It is true that what we do is that what is illegal offline is illegal online, and we harmonize the rules for taking down materials that are not legal. But it's true it's based on, for instance, either community law in EU, terrorist content, for instance, or national laws, as you said, for instance, from Germany. But the perception when we spoke to the staffers was that they thought we could take down a lot of things, or ask the platforms to take down a lot of things, also not legal things. And when we tried to explain about the Digital Services Act, how it works, the systemic risks and the risk mitigation measures we have in the DSA, they listened to us. So my question to you is, can we do more from the European side to make the DSA understood in the way that it works, in the way that it really works? I can hear that you understand it, but not everyone. Second part is, do you believe on digital questions, can we work more together? As I understand it, you have a bipartisan support for a Kids Off Social Media Act. I don't know how far you are with that, but is there any chance that we can work together on these topics? Because we're also working on that in the European Parliament and in this Internal Market Committee. So thank you for being here today. I believe in the transatlantic cooperation, but I also think that we need to get rid of the misunderstandings about each other's laws, and thank you for helping us with that today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. For the EPP, Pablo Echeverría, online.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, hi.
Yes, hi.
Ok, voy a hablar en español si la interpretación me lo permite. ¿Está bien? Perfecto. Muy bien, lo primero, darle las gracias, señor Raskin, por acudir a la Comisión del Mercado Interior del Parlamento Europeo. La verdad es que cuando ha hablado usted de cuestiones digitales y de la cuestión de la libertad de expresión y los ataques que hemos tenido, o de la DSA, la verdad es que hay muchas cosas en las que podemos estar absolutamente de acuerdo. Sin embargo, pues he de decirle que no es el sitio para hablar, en mi opinión, de la administración Trump, ni en mi caso, por ejemplo, del presidente de mi gobierno, sobre las cuestiones que están haciendo o no en el ámbito digital. Simplemente dicho esto, para no perder el tiempo que tengo, sí que creo que hay muchas cuestiones. Yo también creo en la cooperación transatlántica. Creo que las normas que hemos establecido en el marco jurídico del mercado único en el ámbito digital vienen a recoger o a ordenar nuestro mercado dentro de lo que es el ámbito digital. La DSA es una de esas legislaciones, y muy lejos de ir en contra de la libertad de expresión, precisamente lo que hace es no meterse en los contenidos y aportar o brindar más luz, si cabe, dentro de la libertad de expresión, que por otro lado, dentro de la Unión Europea, es probablemente el espacio de mayor libertad de expresión a nivel mundial. Sí que es verdad que hay muchas cosas que no me gustan y que yo soy un gran defensor de esa relación, como le decía, transatlántica. Y sí que es verdad que las cuestiones que estamos viviendo alejan mucho a gente que, como yo, cree en esa relación, y por tanto creo que hay que volver a tender esos puentes. Creo que esos puentes son fundamentales, y creo que es muy importante también por nuestra parte explicar que la legislación que estamos haciendo y que se ha hecho en la Unión Europea, lejos de echarnos para atrás, vamos a seguir apostando por ella, porque creemos en las libertades de los ciudadanos, creemos en el potencial de nuestras empresas, y sobre todo creemos en que es fundamental el que aquello que es ilegal offline también lo sea online. Por tanto, simplemente agradecerle su presencia hoy, decirle que desde el Grupo Parlamentario del Partido Popular Europeo apostamos por esas reglas digitales, que ya hemos empezado a trabajar en ellas, y sobre todo pues el trasladar que, lejos de hacer lo mismo que se hace en Estados Unidos con la situación de TikTok, aquí, en vez de comprar la empresa para cambiar de manipulador, aquí lo que hacemos es legislar para proteger tanto a nuestras empresas como a nuestros ciudadanos. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Now for the Patriots, Mr. Schaller-Baron.
Madam President, Congressmen, dear colleagues, thank you so much for your time. We are once again debating the global implication of the Digital Service Act, particularly in light of concerns raised by the United States of America. Yet it seems the situation has remained unsolved for a long time, and our transatlantic partners' reservation persists. Colleagues, Europe's interest is not in isolating itself as a digital regulatory superpower, it is in remaining credible as a global norm setter. And credibility requires more than convincing ourselves here in this room. We must also convince our partners. The question is, why do some members from both the EPP and the left wing think it's unnecessary to hear the perspective of the current US administration as well, or somebody from the majority party? I understand that during the IMCO mission to Washington last year, you did not hear only praise for the EU's digital internal market regulation, and precisely for that reason a genuine dialogue is needed, not selective hearings. Congressman, let me ask you this. The findings of the United States House Committee on the Judiciary contain rather serious criticism of EU digital regulation, particularly regarding freedom of expression and the obligation imposed on platforms. Do you really believe that everyone is wrong, the US legislature, the tech sector, countless civil society organizations, and millions of users, and only here in Brussels or US Democrats knows what's right for the future of free speech? Or is it possible that, contrary to the framing of this debate, these are not misleading narratives but genuine concerns about an overreaching regulation, and we can have an open conversation about that with all the actors who are involved? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And just a technical information, when the IMCO was in Washington, we met, for example, with Jim Jordan and other Republicans and so on, but just as a full picture and the technical information. For ECR, Mr. Pipera, you want to come in or? Yeah.
Just a few words, but if I may, in Romanian, can I have the translation, please? Yeah? Foarte pe scurt, două probleme pe care le ridic. În primul rând, este vorba despre lipsa unui echilibru în această dezbatere. Aș fi fost interesat să văd și care este opinia congresmanului Jim Jordan în privința acestui raport. Noi știm doar ceea ce a apărut în presă despre conținutul acestui raport. Aș fi vrut să văd motivațiile pe care le are Jim Jordan. Înțeleg însă că acest lucru nu este posibil pentru că s-a votat împotrivă. Poate că reluăm această idee. Și a doua chestiune care se ridică aici este dacă Statele Unite trebuie să respecte sau nu suveranitatea legislativă și chiar și tehnologică a Uniunii Europene, ci dacă acest instrument, Digital Services Act, este sau nu este, din când în când, utilizat ca armă politică, pentru că problematica ridicată este nu doar cea cu privire la libertatea de expresie, ci mult mai grav, aceea că DSA poate, din când în când, să fie utilizată ca armă politică. Nu este nevoie decât să reamintesc ceea ce susținea la un moment dat, pe un post public de televiziune, domnul Thierry Breton. Dacă am utilizat acest instrument în România, desigur, pentru anularea alegerilor, poate că e momentul să utilizăm acest instrument și în Germania, Franța, Spania și așa mai departe.
For Renew, Sandro Gossi.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jamie. I'm very happy to discuss this issue with you again after our meetings in the Congress, and thank you also for your clear words. It's very important that our American friends understand that the pillar, as many colleagues have already said, of DSA, what is illegal offline, it must become illegal online, and so we don't interfere in the national legislation. I think you were very clear. The clearer we are, also with your administration, the better, because this is clearly, at least it is an obvious misunderstanding, to say the least. But I would like to draw your attention and to ask you three questions. The first, I read the report of Jim Jordan, whom, as our chair rightly mentioned, we met, so we are fully balanced from this perspective. So I read the report of Jim Jordan of the House of Committee on the Judiciary. And I found a lot of familiar languages. It were all the arguments that the big tech used against the DSA when we started to work on this. So, first question, dear Jamie, are you aware of influence of the big tech on the drafting of this report under the responsibility of Jim Jordan? The second point, when we met Jim Jordan, he said, and we explained the DSA, especially we explain also the part on DSA which seeks to protect ourselves from foreign interference, is a world where there is no such a thing like foreign interference. I don't believe in that. So I would like from Representative Raskin to tell us how does he assess the national security strategy of the US administration, and whether he doesn't think that the strong support to argument against the DSA, which the US administration shares with Eastern right forces within the EU, are or not a form of interference. The last point, the third question, is whether you are aware of formal instruction given by Secretary of State Rubio to your ambassador in the European Union to actively lobby against the DSA and the other digital legislation. We have received this information. According to our information, Secretary of State gave instruction to US ambassador in the EU to lobby against our already approved digital legislation. Do you have the same information, or can you confirm this? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now for the Greens, Alexandra Giese.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Congressman Raskin, thanks a lot for taking the time to talk with us about the DSA and freedom of speech. I share your concerns about the state of the American democracy. In fact, one of the most renowned institutes for research around democracy, the Swedish Vidam Institute, confirmed a few days ago that according to international standards, the US is not a liberal democracy anymore. And thanks also for pointing out how the US are trying to internationalize their speech standards. And I'm not so much concerned on freedom of speech, and you mentioned Nazi propaganda. I'm concerned about censorship. Just to give you one example, a few days ago, 600 women health leaders wrote a letter about content around fertility, menopause, and other women's health topics systematically being censored on social media. So in Europe, we are suffering from the censorship that is imposed by US standards. I have a few questions for you. My first question is, why is Judiciary Committee and the US administration so obsessed with the digital services? And I want to quote a story that was reported in the Washington Post that said in early 2025, aides to Vice President J.D. Vance ordered the State Department to document how EU regulators censored online speech based on the DSA. They did a week-long investigation, and they couldn't come up with any records of censorship. So they do know there is no censorship, so why did they keep insisting? And I could add that according to our information, 1/3 of the content taken down by platforms for European users is reinstated thanks to the DSA. So it's really actually a weapon against censorship. So why are they so obsessed with it? What purpose are they trying to achieve? A second question, there are reports about very unorthodox working methods of the Judiciary Committee when it fought against institutions that combated foreign interference or disinformation in the US. So witnesses that were being subpoenaed who had undergo hour-long interrogations behind closed doors, a lot of footage which they couldn't revise, of which snippets were released very arbitrarily. And there was communication being subpoenaed of academic actors, civil society organizations. Do you think these methods are also used in these investigations around the DSA? Do you think they are affecting research organizations? And could that negatively impact the DSA enforcement here in Europe? And is that a form of foreign interference? And a very quick last question. I'm seeing you, Chair. What can we do in Europe to support freedom of speech in the US? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now for the left is not there. Correct. For ESN, Peter Bistron.
Thank you, Chair. I will speak in German. I ask for translation. Wir haben hier ernsthafte Probleme mit Meinungsfreiheit und mit Wahlmanipulationen in den letzten Jahren, die dadurch passieren, dass die EU-Kommission auf der einen Seite Meinungen der Opposition, legitime, demokratisch gewählte Politiker zensieren lässt in den sozialen Medien und auf der anderen Seite Medien, Mainstream-Medien dafür bezahlt, dass sie ihre Propaganda verbreiten. Und wenn das im Justizausschuss des House of Representatives diskutiert wird und da 11 Jahre Kommunikation zwischen der Kommission und den großen Big Tech-Unternehmen aus den USA ausgewertet werden und aufgrund dieser Fakten festgestellt wird, dass wir hier ernsthafte Probleme haben, dann laden Sie hier diesen Menschen ein, um hier uns im Europäischen Parlament zu beraten, einen gescheiterten, mehrfach gescheiterten Trump-Hasser, der versucht hat, schon 2016 die demokratisch erfolgte Wahl von Trump rückgängig zu machen mit einer Handvoll von linksextremen Demokraten, ist damit gescheitert, der dann ein Impeachment-Verfahren gegen Trump betrieben hat, auch gescheitert ist damit und hier jetzt das bestätigt hat, dass er nur ein Trump-Hasser ist, weil er 10 Minuten seiner Redezeit hier nur Trump-Hasstiraden abgesondert hat und die USA gezeichnet hat wie eine Diktatur irgendwo zwischen Nordkorea und Iran. Also das ist wirklich ein Desaster. Jetzt zur Sache, zu der Sie fast gar nicht gesprochen haben, lieber Kollege Raskin. Eigentlich sollte hier Jim Jordan sprechen an Ihrer Stelle. Das wäre der kompetente Ansprechpartner. Aus den USA wurde über USAID wurden amerikanische NGOs bezahlt, jahrzehntelang wie OCCRP, denen große Medien gehören und die Meinungen manipulieren, die dazu führen, dass hier Wahlergebnisse manipuliert werden in der EU. Das ist das Problem, das wir haben und dagegen wir hier ankämpfen. Und deswegen sind wir natürlich dankbar, dass sich die amerikanische Regierung unter Trump dieses Themas annimmt und dass wir das hier zumindest so diskutieren können. Dankeschön.
Vielleicht auch noch mal eine technische Bemerkung, weil jetzt viel über Demokratie geredet wurde. Es gab eine demokratische Entscheidung in diesem Komitee, diesen Gast einzuladen. Deswegen können Sie es scheiße finden oder nicht, aber das ist auch Demokratie. So.
Danke. Und ich wollte noch sagen, dass er die größte, stärkste Partei in Deutschland beleidigt hat in seinen Ausführungen.
Und Ihre Redezeit ist vorbei. We are now going to the second round and we have no one from the EPP or SND, and we have for the Patriots, Martin Frias.
Gracias, señora presidenta. Antes que nada, permítame matizarle a usted, que usted ha empezado diciendo que aquí teníamos un punto de vista americano. Y aquí precisamente no ha habido un punto de vista americano. Ha habido una visión, pero en ningún caso representativa de lo que es la visión americana, muy al contrario de lo que usted ha dicho. Yo no alcanzo a entender, para empezar, la perorata que hemos escuchado de 20 minutos de propaganda, de la cual de esos 20 minutos ha dedicado, en el mejor de los casos, este señor, 2 minutos, en el mejor de los casos, a hablar del tema que hoy nos congrega aquí. Además, es que yo no di crédito. Porque este caballero, además, es que él despachaba un trabajo de más de 150 páginas, documentado y con pruebas, en 4 folios que podía haber redactado cualquier funcionario de la Comisión Europea. Pero es que además sepa, señor congresista, que nosotros pedimos invitar a los autores del informe que precisamente se rebatía aquí, para poder debatir y profundizar en la que a nosotros nos preocupa y que además es legítimo que nos preocupe. Aunque haya gente en esta mesa, en este comité, que no esté de acuerdo, es legítimo que tengamos una preocupación y que en torno a ella haya un debate. Y esa preocupación era en torno a la censura y las prácticas, a nuestro entender, matoniles de la Comisión a través de la Ley de Servicios Digitales. Pero como puede ver este señor, este congresista, está solo. Aquí no ha habido debate, porque el resto de miembros de este comité, paladines del pluralismo, han vetado a los compañeros republicanos del señor que está aquí, que él estará feliz y encantado, a pesar de haberlo solicitado grupos que representan a más de 38 millones de europeos. Ciudadanos a los que, déjeme acabar por favor, que yo he aguantado 20 minutos. Ciudadanos a los que el Partido Popular Europeo, socialistas, los verdes y toda la izquierda desprecian en su afán por ser policías del pensamiento, lo que probablemente comparten con el invitado de hoy. Y es una vergüenza lo que ha pasado hoy, una auténtica vergüenza.
Thank you. For ECR, Stefano Cavadegna.
Thank you, President. I would like to speak in Italian. Grazie Presidente, il dialogo transatlantico è fondamentale per noi conservatori, soprattutto quando si parla di democrazia, libertà, Stato di diritto. Tuttavia, proprio perché condividiamo questi valori, credo sia necessario un confronto franco e anche critico. Quando venne votato il Digital Service Act, venne votato per cercare di garantire più libertà, ma allo stesso tempo anche più controllo sulle piattaforme digitali. Ma una domanda che forse è scomoda mi pare opportuna. Stiamo davvero difendendo la democrazia o rischiamo di limitarla? Perché quello che è emerso anche nelle ultime settimane, grazie al Congresso americano, è che evidentemente c'è qualcuno che utilizza questo strumento per tappare la bocca a qualcuno che utilizza questo strumento per sanzionare delle piattaforme digitali e sanzionando le piattaforme digitali si sanziona la libertà di espressione dei cittadini. Andando quindi a chiudere, facendo questa valutazione, noi siamo per l'idea di tutelare la libertà di espressione, per ascoltare quello che ci viene detto anche talvolta dall'altra parte della sponda dell'Atlantico dai nostri alleati tradizionali, dai quali dovremmo forse comprendere e a volte forse dobbiamo comprendere cosa significa la libertà di espressione, perché troppe volte qui in questa casa, col presupposto di evitare gli abusi, si è finito per tappare la bocca e limitare la libertà e la democrazia in un continente, quello europeo, dove la democrazia invece è nata. Grazie.
For Renew, Stéphanie Yocotin.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Chers collègues, tout le monde est bien évidemment favorable à une relation transatlantique saine et transparente et apaisée. Et merci beaucoup, Monsieur le représentant américain Raskin, pour votre présence, votre temps. Et merci d'assurer de notre soutien dans ce moment de bouleversement, parfois, ou de crispation des relations transatlantiques. Et à l'inverse, je regrette que votre collègue, Monsieur Jim Jordan, ne soit pas là pour pouvoir effectivement nous expliquer l'objectif du rapport et des attaques dans son récent rapport de la commission judiciaire décrivant le DSA comme, je cite, un outil de censure étrangère et exposant publiquement plusieurs fonctionnaires et responsables européens, les exposant publiquement à des menaces et à des risques, et tout ça est absolument inacceptable. J'avais d'ailleurs pris l'initiative, et plusieurs collègues que je remercie m'ont suivi en co-signant un courrier à la présidente von der Leyen pour savoir comment la Commission pourrait protéger ses fonctionnaires qui sont livrés en pâture et également savoir qui sera le prochain. Nous condamnons bien sûr les sanctions prises par les autorités américaines contre l'ancien commissaire européen Thierry Breton, contre des responsables d'ONG et même un parlementaire français national pour leur rôle dans le DSA et donc ces sanctions doivent être levées au plus vite. Je leur dis, les menaces sur le DSA et nos lois européennes doivent cesser. Il ne faut pas céder aux pressions ni au chantage des membres de l'administration Trump et des dirigeants des big tech. Monsieur Raskin, j'ai 3 questions pour vous. On voit bien que le DSA fait peur, mais est-ce que selon vous, il est suffisamment efficace dans sa mise en œuvre et sur les effets sur les plateformes? On pense notamment à la sanction prise à la fin de l'année dernière contre X et aux différentes enquêtes de la Commission en cours. Deuxième question. Pensez-vous qu'on puisse imaginer un jour un DSA à l'américaine? Est-ce que cette idée est soutenue par une partie du personnel politique américain et peut-être par l'opinion publique? Et enfin, j'aimerais savoir ce qu'en pense le milieu des entreprises au-delà des géants de la tech américaine. Est-ce que la tendance est toujours à soutenir une ligne anti-DSA comme X et Elon Musk, ou est-ce que certains, comme en Californie, seraient favorables à davantage de régulation? Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you. For the Greens, Kim van Sparentak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raskin. I think you gave a very interesting overview to what extent censorship is actually happening on your side of the pond, and I think it is very interesting to hear your perspective because we, of course, primarily hear the perspective of the MAGA movement on our digital laws, and it's quite loud and clear that they don't like them. But I always wonder, what do you think is the incentive for MAGA to attack our digital laws? And what do you think they can gain from having being in charge and deciding on how we, in the end, regulate our markets? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that concludes the list of speakers. And with that, I would give the floor back to Mr. Raskin to respond to the members' questions. So for around about 5 minutes, if you can.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's remarks and comments, and I wish we had more time to engage. But let me do my best to address all of the questions that came in. Back to Ms. Chaldenos, can we do more to explain, or can Europe do more to explain to the rest of the world or to America how the DSA works? Absolutely. The vast majority of our people have no understanding at all of what the DSA is or what's happening. And despite the impression you might be getting from the Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee, this is not an issue in America. Nobody's really aware of it. So there is the opportunity actually to give people a real education about the various kinds of problems that you're trying to address with the DSA. And some people in America might agree with you about, people might disagree with you, or you might get a difference of opinion within America. But I think that would be all to the good. On Mr. Echeverria's point about treating online speech like offline speech, I think that is a clarifying analysis for people here to understand what's happening. And obviously, a lot of the underlying domestic laws within the EU are different from our First Amendment tradition, which we are very proud of. And we believe in generally unlimited, untrammeled political free speech, which is why what's happening in America today is so alarming to us, with Donald Trump trying to squelch political free speech, take away licenses from people whose speech he disagrees with, and then even people being shot down in the streets, which is why I started with that, not to distract anyone from the matter at hand, but to locate it in terms of a free speech controversy going on in America right now. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the EU as much as the House Judiciary Committee wants people to be doing that. That's not what's being discussed today. What's being discussed is the attacks on the law firms, the colleges, the universities, the newspapers, and broadcasting, fundamental free speech rights. For those of my friends on the right who are saying that they would like to have seen Jim Jordan or would like to see Jim Jordan speak before the Parliament as well, I do not disagree in any way with that. I believe in more speech. I'm a free speech libertarian. Please bring in Mr. Jordan to face your questions, to answer about all of the process questions people have. We're not really exposed to what's going on in the back rooms there. For those people who want to know what's motivating it, all I will tell you is that when Donald Trump was sworn into office, he had with him, standing right behind him, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and I believe also Sundar Pichai from Google. So it was the titans of big tech who were there, and they have had tremendous influence in Donald Trump's domestic and foreign policy initiatives and seem to have a dominant political voice there. So, we don't need any conspiracy theories about that. They're right out front with it. So, is DSA being used as a political weapon? Several people ask. Yes, it should not be used as a political weapon. Undoubtedly, there are things we can learn from you. There are things you can learn from us. And we might just have some differences on particular issues. There are certainly things we can work together on, like the protection of children online. That is something that people in America are very concerned about. And I don't know anybody who says, oh, well, we should just have unlimited speech in, child pornography or the exploitation of kids here. So that is not part of this absolutist free speech political position that's being represented to you about America. So DSA, it has been used as a weapon in the politics here. So let me just say finally that I believe there are lots of very interesting things that we can work on together, and that we should be able to discuss and make policy progress on working in concert. But it cannot start from the assumption that one side believes in political free expression and the other side does not. There are all kinds of exclusions in American law. We don't accept incitement to imminent lawless action. We don't accept defamation. We draw all kinds of lines, and you draw lines. And so we should have that discussion about what works. But we believe that this is being used as a weapon to attack freedom in Europe and to support extreme right political parties, because the same people who are perpetrating that campaign have no problem with this massive crackdown on freedom of speech taking place in America today. I yield back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much for your answers and also for being concise. Absolutely. We still have the Commission at the end to also react. And I welcome Marco Giorello, Head of Unit from DG Connect.
Thanks a lot, Madam Chair. I think I can be very brief. It was very interesting to be listening to the conversation and actually to the various interventions. I think I can be very brief just to reassure everybody, as we have said several times, that we really believe that the accusation of censorship against the DSA are unfounded. I think there are a number of provisions in the Digital Services Act that clearly demonstrates that. Also the figures actually that some of you have recently mentioned in this discussion about the transparency reports that the platforms have to publish under the DSA demonstrates in fact that there is, thanks to the DSA, a large number of decisions of the platforms that are reversed to the advantage of users asking to reinstate their content. And finally, one word about the United States. The Commission keeps being engaged actually at a different level with the United States. There is a constant conversation where we explain actually our rules, and we strongly believe that the challenges actually that the online world brings about are very often global: protection of minors, protection against scams, and many other examples. And therefore, it is in the mutual advantage of the United States and Europe to, keep talking about these things, and actually the channels of communication are always open. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much. So this concludes our discussion, our exchange of views. I think it's very, very important to have close connections to the other side of the Atlantic and stay in dialogue. And this is what we're trying today. Thanks so much for Congressman Raskin to take the time and to answer our questions, to give a perspective on the discussions in the US, but also your view on some of the accusations on our digital laws. And again, probably also to say it again, we are also meeting, and we did meet with, for example, a lot of Republicans when we were in Washington. But of course, for us as IMCO committee, as Parliament, we stand ready to defend our digital legislation, and this is also our task here in this committee. So thanks so much for everyone. This concludes our agenda. If there's not any other business, we conclude also the IMCO meeting for that day. Have a very good evening.